So I'm going to start with what, in my view, was honestly, I think, politically speaking, among actual progressives, the end of Elizabeth Warren's political career. I think Elizabeth Warren has lit her political career into flames. I don't say that as a Bernie Sanders supporter. I say that as somebody who has watched her essentially evolve in the last calendar year from progressive, not as progressive as Bernie, but more progressive than somebody like Joe Biden, definitely more progressive than somebody like Donald Trump, to somebody who essentially traded in her integrity for out of desperation. So if you missed this moment, Elizabeth Warren, um, Elizabeth Warren, in her desperation, and I went over this in my live stream a little bit earlier. I mean, she's desperate. All you got to do, I mean, just look at the numbers. Iowa, in October, she was at 22%. Now she's down at 15% in a recent poll. New Hampshire, 32% in October. She was leading in New Hampshire. Most recent poll, 18%. Nevada, fewer polls than other states, 21% down to 11%. Elizabeth Warren has freefalled, and her campaign thought it would be a great idea to leak to CNN. And I tweeted out before the debate, shockingly, a CNN anchor literally, Erin Burnett literally said, obviously Elizabeth Warren's campaign leaked this to CNN. So at least somebody on CNN is stating the obvious that Elizabeth Warren's campaign leaked this to CNN. So what you have here is Elizabeth Warren essentially maybe interpreting something Bernie Sanders said during a private conversation to mean a woman couldn't win. Bernie Sanders obviously didn't say a woman couldn't win. You would have to think Bernie Sanders is just a bold-faced liar. Elizabeth Warren might have interpreted Bernie Sanders talking about the misogyny she would be up against in a private meeting as Bernie saying you wouldn't win. When CNN, to their credit, they didn't start the debate with this. I thought they were going to start the debate with this. When they asked Bernie Sanders, he did not equivocate. He said, I did not say that. And here's my record. I've been stating since the 1980s that a woman could be president and should be president. He stated, I lobbied to get Elizabeth Warren to run in 2015. She decided not to run. You could tell when somebody's lying. Bernie Sanders looked aggressively to the audience. He was passionate. He came across to me as credible. When CNN then turns around, takes Bernie Sanders' denial in a framing that is the most ludicrous framing of a question I've ever seen. Bernie Sanders just aggressively denied it. Instead of saying, Senator Warren, Senator Sanders says he didn't say this. What do you have to say? They basically turn around and pretend Bernie Sanders didn't just deny it, and they say
women could not win the election.
That is correct.
Senator Warren, what did you think when Senator Sanders told you a woman could not win the election?
Just totally pretending Bernie Sanders didn't just say this. I mean, they are literally a paid super PAC for the establishment. What's amazing to me, Elizabeth Warren, who again leaked this, her campaign leaked this to CNN, terrible political calculation. It's already backfiring on her. They thought it would help her. They thought it might pick off some female Bernie supporters. I don't know what their thoughts were. She very feebly looks down and says, I didn't agree.
I disagreed. Bernie is my friend, and
The best part is when she looks down and says, I didn't agree. She she doesn't have the courage of her convictions. Like she didn't have the courage of her convictions to endorse Bernie in 2016. Like she didn't have the courage of her convictions to stand by Medicare for all, capital M Medicare for all. Like she didn't have the courage of her convictions to go out and scream to the rooftops about Native Americans and environmental activists getting the living beep smacked out of them. What's incredible to me about all this, when she looks down and clearly she can't even look at Bernie because she knows she's lying. That's how you know when people are lying. They look down or they look away. I am trained as a journalist to know when people are lying. They don't look at your eyes. Only the psychopaths look at your eyes. And that takes real skill to know when the psychopaths are lying. Then, when she's looking down because she is lying, she doubles down on the lie by pivoting into a talking point about how she is the only candidate on this stage that has defeated an incumbent Republican in the last 30 years. Not that that even matters. Like, who cares if you beat an incumbent Republican? I don't really think it matters that Bernie beat an incumbent Republican. But her campaign, who fed her that talking point, must have not checked that Bernie Sanders defeated an incumbent Republican in 1990. I failed math, but 1990, 2020, that's 30 years ago. So when Bernie Sanders interjects and says, I beat an incumbent Republican to become a congressman in Vermont, Elizabeth Warren, it's like she's short-circuiting. She can't, her lie is just short-circuiting.
I defeated an incumbent Republican running for Congress.
When?
1990. That's how I won, beat a Republican congressman. Number two, of course, I don't think there's any debate up here.
What, wasn't it 30 years ago?
I beat an incumbent Republican congressman.
And I said I was the only one who's beaten an incumbent Republican in 30 years.
Well, 30 years ago was 1990, as a matter of fact.
Here is what probably happened, okay? And I said this earlier, and I'm going to say it again. Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren had a private meeting. The New York Times reported that private meeting right after. And Bernie Sanders probably said to her, are you prepared for the sexist, misogynist attacks that are going to come your way from Donald Trump? I could believe Bernie Sanders said that. Elizabeth Warren might have internalized that as he's saying I can't win because I'm a woman. Again, if I call you fat, that's me calling you fat. Very bad. I shouldn't. If I say to my girlfriend, I don't know if you look so great in that. I don't know if that looks so great. And she interprets it that I'm calling her fat. That doesn't mean I called you fat. That might mean I don't think it's a nice color on you. That might mean, I don't know, it doesn't fit correctly. She interpreted Bernie Sanders saying she can't win and then fed it and then said it to her friends and her campaign advisors after, like this is the Real Housewives or something, a ridiculous game of telephone. And then because she's desperate because of the polling numbers I just showed you, she leaked it to CNN. Honestly, I think Bernie Sanders failed, and I'm going to tell you why I think he failed. Because I think Bernie Sanders did not do what he needed to do in this debate, and some of you are going to disagree with me and be mad that I criticized Bernie. Oh, well, I'm going to keep it real. I think Bernie Sanders failed in what he needed to do because, to me, it looked very clear that Bernie Sanders is hurt. You could tell Bernie Sanders, who, frankly, in my view, I think Bernie Sanders has been extremely naive for 4 years about politicians. I think he should have clobbered Hillary Clinton over the head when he had a chance, but he wants to be positive and she's a friend of mine. I think it's his biggest weakness as a politician. I think if he doesn't win the nomination, it's because he never crossed that line. His campaign advisors have told him, Bernie, take off the gloves. Occasionally, Bernie does take off the gloves. In this debate, I don't think he did take off the gloves. And if I'm watching, I'd love to know what Jen thinks. She's in the super chat. If we get more funding, we could figure out a way to bring her in live. I think that, to me, it looked like he was so hurt and still just so blindsided and shocked that Warren basically disrespected him, breached a private meeting that was supposed to stay private, went on a political attack against him, not on policy, because you can't really compete against him on policy. It just seemed like he was so hurt that it kind of threw him off his game against what he really needed to do, which was clobber Joe Biden around the room.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.